26th until the, 31st or something, they're going to be redoing their computer systems, and you may have issues getting at your account, and they're giving you a heads up on that.
Yeah.
I've never received anything like that from any of my banks, so that alone is suspicious. But beyond that, just the sheer number of those showing up is starting to make an impact on the language. So we're starting to see some of the maturation of the lockdown language, even in advance of the event itself, even during this period of the release language. Make
Yes.
sense?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's pretty apparent to most people, I think, that something definitely is in the works. The dollar is almost worthless these days. I've even been reading reports that some of the oil-producing countries are not wanting to accept our dollars anymore as far as a trade currency for oil. So basically what I'm getting is that that's going to leave us at a place with gold and silver, and I've also seen questions coming through about the gold and silver. I mean, how much value will it have? Will we end up having to go into kind of a barter and trade system of operation?
Probably both are true, that there will be a lot of value in gold and silver, but basically it'll be at a barter or a trade system level. I suspect everything will degrade down to some form of, let's call it a gray market, that is probably going to be similar to the Argentine experience. And you're quite correct about the oil-producing countries not wanting to accept the dollar. And it's not really an issue of wanting to accept. We have to really be careful about that, because that may be true of like any of the members of the King Saud family in Saudi Arabia, what we call Saudi Arabia. But we have to realize that they, to a certain extent, were coerced a while back, say 30 or 40 years ago, no, even longer than that, 50, 60 years ago, into accepting the dollar as the currency for which oil could be sold. There was this deal made with King Saud way back when, that he would only sell oil in petrodollars in exchange for the U.S. essentially giving him lots of money and building all kinds of stuff in his country. And so that led us to the dominance of the Anglo-Sphere Empire through the petrodollar issue. And curiously, we find that in the our previous dealings with what we call Iran or Persia, they in fact had a democratic republic that was giving us issues in the late 40s, early 50s, because they didn't want to sell their oil to us in dollars. They just wanted to have an open market and sell their oil to whoever in whatever they could get for it. And we, by that I mean the British government and their stooges, the American government, didn't like it very much. So in 1953, the British government paid the CIA the staggering sum at the time of $1 million plus expenses to go on in and overthrow the democratically elected government of Iran, which they did. They did a real good job. And they replaced it with the Shah, and we have that history from that point on. So to a certain extent, it's not that the Arab countries or oil-producing countries don't want to accept the dollar. It's that our karmic history is coming back to get us. Instant karma is going to get us here because we've been the bad guys. We've been altering the markets. I don't mean we personally, but our political elites and the rulers have been out there screwing the markets over wherever they could. They've been destabilizing governments, seizing property, taking resources right and left, and basically to hell with the common person.
Exactly.
And so now we cannot be surprised when, in the point of our weakness of our currency, all of our supposed or all of our former clients, euphemism there from the IMF and the World Bank, are we're actually just kind of a little bit happy about the whole situation and can't wait for a further sign of weakness, because they don't like the take our dollars or we'll bomb you into the Stone Age kind of a business approach.
Yeah. Now, see, one thing that comes to my mind also is the potential as a control mechanism using the dollar. If they crash our dollar, which is our only, as individuals, is our only source of trading and purchasing right now, that's going to give them quite a bit of control over the populace, don't you think? If they control our assets and our food distribution and whatnot, do you think that's going to be a factor?
That certainly is a tool that can be used, but it's not 100%. We need to really clarify our thinking about that. Right now, there's trillions, or not trillions, but certainly billions of dollars of trade that goes on in the U.S. that don't involve dollar units at all.
Okay.
And so there's already a gray and black market barter system that probably is easily 12 to somewhere over 12% of our gross national product, and it's all done at the barter level. And usually these are what we would consider to be the illegal economies, but nonetheless, that's been getting a broader and broader base for our regular economy. So you're quite correct. There might be some level of control there, but of course, it's an interesting sort of a tool. It's kind of like a nuclear weapon in the sense that it's a great threat, but the minute you use it, from that point on, it's absolutely useless. In this case, if they, meaning the political elite, decided they wanted to control the U.S. populace, and they were going to do it through a crash of the dollar, bear in mind that from that point on, everything is uncertain. And we go back to, what's the guy's name? Art of War, Sun Tzu. When no battle plan survives the first contact with the enemy. In this case, the minute the dollar crashes, the creativity of the populace is released, and it will be very hard to put that creativity back into a control bottle of, say, an amaro or some other currency or something along those lines. Mm-hmm. And I kid you not, if they introduce the amaro by dictator fiat, they are going to run into a situation where maybe they'll come out and say that 5 amaros equal an ounce of silver, and I would be willing to place bets now using the common currency of humans, which is peach pie or something, that the amaro would rapidly go to something on the order of maybe 500 or 600 amaros to an ounce of silver just on the confidence level alone.
See, one thing I've been thinking about a lot is the potential for digital currency. Like if they were to put everything on digital format, would give them complete control, which might tie in with the idea of chipping people. They could essentially turn off your value at will if you didn't comply with what they wanted, or if you were considered a terrorist or a patriot or a rebel or whatnot.
Sure, and that's certainly a tool they can use, but also bear in mind that there's from our viewpoint, sitting out here on the other side of the powers that be, there's a couple of things you need to bear in mind. The first time they do that to you, they automatically force you down into that 12% or whatever portion of the economy that's black market. Yeah. The more they do this to people, the larger that market becomes. They're not stupid. They are stupid, but they're clever. They will be aware of this. So they would be hesitant to use that on a mass scale. And it might be useful on some individuals, but also bear in mind that humans are adaptive. And just because they shut you off of all your currency, all right, so you're going to have a freak out moment, run around for a week, pulling out what hair is left on your head, and then you
It seems like what happened, everybody, is that for some reason we lost the link to Clif, and we're trying to reestablish that right now. What happened? Our YouTube stream went down. I lost my Skype. Clif was being hacked on his end. A lot of weird shit going on here. So we're gonna do our best. Clif thinks he's got about a 40-45 minute window before they come back in and get him again. So we're going to do what we can while we can, okay? And Clif, you want to go ahead and explain a little bit about what happened?
Yes, just as we were being dropped through Skype, a bunch of my little alarms went off. I have some honeypots as well as some port monitors, and all of a sudden there were people trying to crack into my system. It happens repeatedly. It's become rather annoying now because they apparently are targeting times when they know I'll actually be online. But I've rebooted and established a dynamic IP, so that'll throw them off for a while.
Well, you're a pretty popular guy.
They'll have to root around to find us, so yeah.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit after we had lost you about how, this information's valuable, and there's a lot of people out there that really just don't want us exchanging it. So that I think is true. I mean, as paranoid as that sounds, and actually anymore, we've got to all adopt the motto, if you're not paranoid, you're simply not paying attention. Yeah, well, and it's not paranoia if they're really out to get you.
No, it's still paranoia. It's just valid.
Exactly.
Because paranoia doesn't say that it's not true. It just says you have a fear of people trying to get you.
All right. So anyway, it looks like we had a little bit of fun here with the powers that be, or whoever it is out there. If they're monitoring, then from my view and in my opinion, I can just say you guys can all go F yourselves. The information will get out, so.
And that apparently is the case, and it's happening to a lot of people. I was listening to another show the other day, and they had some interruptions, and it just happens on certain sensitive subjects. But let's jump into some of the prep stuff, and then work our way up towards the space goat farts and the alien wars and all of that.
All right, alien wars is something people have been asking about as well. I'll just let you take it here for a bit.
I would say that's got me really excited. I'm not really thrilled about the whole dollar death business. I've lived through a couple of currency problems globally, and it's not a whole lot of fun. It's rather predictable. This time it's going to be real interesting for people in the U.S. because we're going to get a huge shock to our economic base in the sense that we're consuming a disproportionate share of the planetary resources that has been propped up by the dollar. Once the dollar goes away, we'll have to pay real, true value for things.
Yes.
There's no wonder, for instance, that in Europe they were paying $8 a gallon gas, while we were paying $1.29, and it has to do with the fact that the dollar was the currency by which the petro had to be obtained. They had to buy dollars, therefore we controlled it. Once that goes away, we'll be in a reverse situation. Only there will be a natural extreme that we'll have to go to before we bounce back to something a little bit more balanced. Mm-hmm. So it would not surprise me to see things like occurred in Argentina, and to see that you may have to be buying your gasoline in the future from a guy who calls you and then surreptitiously opens up his gasoline store and then sells it to you at $30 or $40 a gallon.
Yeah.
Out of the back of his garage, kind of a deal, right?
Well, we'll do what we have to do. They can control the economy all they want, but if we develop trade amongst ourselves and our own structure of economy, they won't have any control over that.
And it will indeed develop just that way. And it's happened 4 times before on this continent that we've had a currency crash. If you go and read history about what happened immediately before, during, and after, it's going to be a fairly predictable pattern. This time, though, it'll be a little bit different because we don't have the farming resources the way we used to. Both for us, all of us, to live on, and as we did in the previous depression, we were far more rural than we were urban as a nation. And also, we're going to have the issue of the collapse of the food supplies this time, so it's going to get really grim that way. So now, regular people ought to just consider a certain level of priority, and they should say to themselves that, we're not rich, we don't have gazillions of dollars lying around, but we have some little tiny bit of resources. We need to think about how to allocate them. And the first thing I would say is get food that you will eat in the case of a breakdown of the social structure. And that means that you go to the grocery store one day and it simply isn't open because of the riots the night before, or you heard on the news that there's a trucker strike, or no one's shipping oil and therefore the diesel isn't flowing and therefore the truckers aren't moving, and your stores run out of food in 3 or 4 days. Well, it makes sense to buy food that you will eat. So make sure that if you're buying freeze-dried stuff, buy a little tiny bit of it and sample it just to make sure that it's going to be compatible with you. On the whole, I think there's a lot of stuff in our regular diets that we can buy and store, long-term storage, pasta, that kind of thing. And that needs to be your first priority, because it will be I think at least 3 to 4 months, according to the way that data has shaped up in the crocodile teeth going into a context shift on December 29. And so I say that we had a currency crisis that developed from October 25th through to November 4th, and we're all in tension mode, and we're kind of wondering what's going to happen, and then some kind of release up and down for the rest of November. I would suspect that if we have that current level of a currency crisis, it'll be January or February before we have an even started the process of coming up with patches for the systems that are failing. So that means that there might be 3 or 4 months when food supplies are at best erratic, and everybody should pray diligently